Moments on the border or the moments of actual transition in life are very special and eerie to me. Even this something as simple as finishing a book. I don't know. It causes me to feel things. All right, this is the 119th episode of the Henry George Daily Devotional. It is October 10th. I believe I started this series. Oh, I guess I could look it up this way a little more easily. Looks like my first episode was February 26th. So this has been almost 8 months. Not the largest commitment of all time, but a significant one. I will probably continue reading Henry George's works and live streaming them, especially because I want to do that with the Georgism Discord servers book club. But here we go. We will finish Progress in Poverty, an inquiry into the cause of industrial depressions and increase of want with increase of wealth, the remedy. The remedy is the land value tax. The cause is private property in land, land which no one made, land which everyone needs, land which our laws allow the hoarding and monopolization of. And this leads to corruption, tyranny, and the rotting and falling of a society. Let's see what George thinks is important to tell us here at the end. Conclusion: the problem of individual life. The days of the nation bear no trace of all the sunshine so far foretold. The cannon speaks in the teacher's place. The age is weary with work and gold. And high hopes wither and memories wane. On hearths and altars the fires are dead. But that brave faith hath not lived in vain. And this is all that our watcher said. Francis Brown. Conclusion: the problem of individual life. George writes, my task is done, yet the thought still mounts. The problems we have been considering lead into a problem higher and deeper still. Behind the problems of social life lies the problem of individual life. I have found it impossible to think of the one without thinking of the other. And so, I imagine, will it be with those who, reading this book, go with me in thought. For, as says Guizot, when the history of civilization is completed, when there is nothing more to say as to our present existence, man inevitably asks himself whether all is exhausted, whether he has reached the end of all things. This problem I cannot now discuss. I speak of it only because the thought which, while writing this book, has come with inexpressible cheer to me, may also be of cheer to some who read it. Whatever be its fate, it will be read by some who in their heart of hearts have taken the cross of a new crusade. This thought will come to them without my suggestion, but we are sure that we see a star when we know that others also see it. The truth that I have tried to make clear will not find easy acceptance. If that could be, it would have been accepted long ago. If that could be, it would never have been obscured. But it will find friends, those who will toil for it, suffer for it, if need be, die for it. This is the power of truth. Will it at length prevail? Ultimately, yes, but in our own times, or in times of which any memory of us remains, who shall say? For the man who, seeing the want and misery, the ignorance and brutishness caused by unjust social institutions, sets himself, in so far as he has strength, to right them, there is disappointment and bitterness. So it has been of old times, so is it even now. But the bitterest thought, and it sometimes comes to the best and bravest, is that of the hopelessness of the effort, the futility of the sacrifice. To how few of those who sow the seed is it given to see it grow, or even with certainty to know that it will grow. Let us not disguise it. Over and over again has the standard of truth and justice been raised in this world. Over and over again has it been trampled down, oftentimes in blood. If they are weak forces that are opposed to truth, how should error so long prevail? If justice has but to raise her head to have injustice flee before her, how should the wail of the oppressed so long go up? But for those who see truth and would follow her, for those who recognize justice and would stand for her, success is not the only thing. Success. Why, falsehood has often that to give, and injustice often has that to give. Must not truth and justice have something to give that is their own by proper right, theirs in essence and not by accident? That they have, and that here and now every one who has felt their exaltation knows. But sometimes the clouds sweep down. It is sad, sad reading. The lives of the men who would have done something for their fellows. To Socrates they gave the hemlock. Gracchus they killed with sticks and stones. I don't know Gracchus. I don't remember Gracchus. And one, greatest and purest of all, they crucified. These seem but types. Today Russian prisons are full, and in long processions, men and women who but for high-minded patriotism might have lived in ease and luxury, move in chains towards the death and life of Siberia. And in penury and want, in neglect and contempt, destitute even of the sympathy that would have been so sweet, how many in every country have closed their eyes? This we see, but do we see it all? In writing I have picked up a newspaper. In it is a short account, evidently translated from a semi-official report, of the execution of 3 nihilists at Kiev. The Prussian subject Brantner, the unknown man calling himself Antonov, and the nobleman Osinski. At the foot of the gallows they were permitted to kiss one another. Then the hangman cut the rope. The surgeons pronounced the victims dead. The bodies were buried at the foot of the scaffold, and the nihilists were given up to eternal oblivion. Thus says the account. I do not believe it. No, not to oblivion. I have in this inquiry followed the course of my own thought. When in my mind I set out on it, I had no theory to support, no conclusions to prove. I have been reading his previous book, Our Land and Land Policy, and he definitely hadn't formulated all of this theory at that time. He was searching still. Only when I first realized the squalid misery of a great city, it appalled and tormented me, and would not let me rest, for thinking of what caused it and how it could be cured. But out of this inquiry has come to me something I did not think to find, and a faith that was dead revives. The yearning for a further life is natural and deep. It grows with intellectual growth, and perhaps none really feel it more than those who have begun to see how great is the universe, and how infinite are the vistas which every advance in knowledge opens before us, vistas which would require nothing short of eternity to explore. But in the mental atmosphere of our times, to the great majority of men on whom mere creeds have lost their hold, it seems impossible to look on this yearning, save as a vain and childish hope, arising from man's egotism, and for which there is not the slightest ground or warrant, but which, on the contrary, seems inconsistent with positive knowledge. Now, when we come to analyze and trace up the ideas that thus destroy the hope of a future life, we shall find them, I think, to have their source Not in any revelations of physical science, but in certain teachings of political and social science which have deeply permeated thought in all directions. They have their root in doctrines that there is a tendency to the production of more human beings than can be provided for, that vice and misery are the result of natural laws, and the means by which advance goes on, and that human progress is by a slow race development. These are not things he believes. These are the things which we have spent hours discussing and debunking. This idea that there is a tendency to the production of more human beings than can be provided for. You don't understand how much energy is available if you believe this. This is only a true thing given the tyranny, given the siphoning of power of landlords. But without that, there is so much energy. We are so far from being out of energy. That vice and misery are the result of natural laws. There are some things the land value tax won't solve. I don't know. There was a recent rift in some of the personal relationships of people I am close to, and it's not really my business, but I eventually did talk to one of the people, and one of the first things they started talking about was how stressed out they are about money, which was sort of surprising to me, but not to George. But you also wonder if this individual had more money, because they already have a fair amount, wouldn't, sort of as George says, our desires grow as soon as they're filled. Man as an animal is not like other animals who only want to eat and sleep and reproduce. We want to eat and sleep and reproduce and wear cool shoes and do our hair right and have shiny things, lots of shiny things. And those aren't bad. It's only bad if we deny others the right to reproduce and eat and sleep and feel warm and safe so that we can have shiny things. And that human progress is by slow race development. I was thinking about this this morning. I read some blogs making all kinds of wild claims or discussing wild ideas about the future and AI and society and physics and black holes and singularities. And it's all overwhelming. And then I think, next time you see another human, and I was just like in my neighborhood, you just see random middle-aged people out in their yard doing yard work. You just think of that human animal. Get rid of all their clothes and their hair care products and their eyeglasses, and they're just this creature, and they're not much different than the human creature was. If we are to believe history, it sure doesn't seem they're much different from a human creature 10,000 years ago. These doctrines, which have been generally accepted as a proved truth, do what, except as scientific interpretations have been colored by them, the extensions of physical sciences do not do. Okay. What do? They reduce the individual to insignificance. They destroy the idea that there can be in the ordering of the universe any regard for his existence or any recognition of what we call moral qualities. It is difficult to reconcile the idea of human immortality with the idea that nature wastes men by constantly bringing them into being where there is no room for them. It is difficult to reconcile the idea of human immortality with the idea that nature wastes men by constantly bringing them into being where there is no room for them. I mean, nature brings lots of animals into being where there's no room for them, in some sense, for them to get eaten up by other animals, other predators, population dynamics. But I guess that is why it's difficult to reconcile. Like, if you think if you think humans are no different than the other animals, then yeah, you won't be able to really make that work with human immortality. Not very well, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe we can make dogs immortal. That would be nice. It is impossible to reconcile the idea of an intelligent and beneficent creator with the belief that the wretchedness and degradation, which are the lot of such a large proportion of humankind, results from his enactments. While the idea that man mentally and physically is the result of slow modifications perpetuated by heredity irresistibly suggests the idea that it is the race life, not the individual life, which is the object of human existence. Thus has vanished with many of us, and is still vanishing with more of us, that belief which in the battles and ills of life affords the strongest support and deepest consolation. Now, in the inquiry through which we have passed, we have met these doctrines and seen their fallacy. We have seen that population does not tend to outrun subsistence. We have seen that the waste of human powers and the prodigality of human suffering do not spring from natural laws, but from the ignorance and selfishness of men in refusing to conform to natural laws. We have seen that human progress is not by altering the nature of men, but that on the contrary, the nature of men seems, generally speaking, always the same. Thus, the nightmare which is banishing from the modern world the belief in a future life is destroyed. Not that all difficulties are removed, for turn which way we may, we come to what we cannot comprehend, but that difficulties are removed which seem conclusive and insuperable. I assume this means undefeatable, impossible to overcome. And thus hope springs up. But this is not all. Political economy has been called the dismal science, and as currently taught is hopeless and despairing. But this, as we have seen, is solely because she has been degraded and shackled, her truths dislocated, her harmonies ignored, the words she would utter gagged in her mouth, and her protest against wrong turned into an endorsement of injustice. Freed as I have tried to free her in her own proper symmetry, political economy is radiant with hope. Yeah, it's very odd how reading this instills hope, but also anti-hope. He wrote this 150 years ago. And things kind of have plodded along. I do not live in hell, but I do not live in heaven. For properly understood, the laws which govern the production and distribution of wealth show that the want and injustice of the present social state are not necessary, but that on the contrary, a social state is possible in which poverty would be unknown, and all the better qualities and higher powers of human nature would have opportunity for full development. If you've ever listened to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, they're always super interesting. I haven't listened in years though. But there was this time he would sometimes talk about how he himself is very interested in seeing humans in extreme conditions, which tends to always be extremely desperate in his stories. He doesn't seem to spend too much time talking about the conditions when somebody is like extremely happy and wealthy and healthy. But anyway, there is this weird, maybe I've read too many books, but there is this weird fascination or desire with being put in extreme conditions. You know, the closest I come is a loved one passing away, or I don't know, worrying that I have to ask parents for money or something. I don't know. It's like I don't want to go to war, but I want I I don't anyway. Um, Radiant with hope. For properly understood, I guess there's this part of me that is sort of yeah, like what happens when we get to that Star Trek post-scarcity world. I I do have to make some like I have to like sort of convince myself that that would be not just this boring place. Heaven has always sounded boring to me. You have to say like, oh, there's nothing higher than being united with your creator and joining with him and worship forever and ever, and you'll just be constantly 100% fulfilled and happy is the way it's been sort of described. And yet it sounds boring. I don't know, in War and Peace, Tolstoy talks a lot about has a character, Prince Nikolai, I think, who talks about like happiness is in like deprivation and then fulfillment. The Janning says in chat, just imagine how many more interesting and new recreational opportunities people invent. Yeah, that's like I have a StarCraft match, and this is a video game I play coming up today, and land value tax does not solve that, and I wouldn't want it to, and I am nervous about it, and I care about it, um, and it's so fun. Like if I were right now in a war zone, I wouldn't care at all about it. Um, yeah. For properly understood, the laws which govern. It's nice to see you, Janning, here in the final Henry George daily devotional. Yeah. I mean, I was trying to go through it quicker, but I can't help myself. For properly understood, the laws couldn't miss it. Oh, Patrick is here too. Enraptured. That's funny because this says there's two people here and one is always me. So I don't know. Restream.io is what's the word? Unreliable narrator. But is George an unreliable narrator? I don't know. Let's go. For properly understood, the laws which govern the production and distribution of wealth show that the want and injustice of the present social state are not necessary, but that on the contrary, a social state is possible in which poverty would be unknown, and all the better qualities and higher powers of human nature would have opportunity for full development. Yeah, somebody ping John. Get him in the chat. We should. We're finishing we're finishing all this work for him. Today, right now, is the conclusion of progress and poverty, and maybe the last HGDD. You're invited. Um, I think his position is that he agrees. He thinks it may not be as significant as George and I and some of us might think. Uh, and then he also says most likely that, probably won't really ever happen. And that also he might also not think things are as bad as maybe George makes out, and some of us might also believe. He says he can be here in 10 minutes. Well, I guess we'll keep. I don't know, for the final, the final episode of the season or of a series. It gets to be double in length, right? Can go for an hour special. I I don't want to have to deal with editing. We could also take a break and then have to edit these videos. That's no fun. Or or we just go on without them. What's the vote? Grand finally. Um, the word counter. Hmm. Yeah, that's how you spell finale. Hmm. What shall we do then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? May it never be. I guess I can stop the recording.